Here, for the first time since a shortened 2011-2012 season, the Sixers are back in the playoffs, and that means you will hear this man's call on 97.3 ESPN. Playoff basketball is back in Philadelphia. Tom McGinnis, how are you?
Doing great, Mike and Pete. Sounds like you have a packed show. Thanks for fitting me in.
We are jammed. We got a lot. I mean, things are going good. The Phillies are getting exciting. The Eagles win the Super Bowl. The Flyers are on the cusp of the playoffs. And the 76ers are back in the playoffs. And one of the reasons I wanted to reach out and have you on, Tom, is because obviously you've called a lot of tough games over the last 5 or 6 seasons. And just to kind of put into words the roller coaster ride that this team has gone on and the landscape of how they got here has to be a very interesting thing for someone who's that close to the team like yourself.
Well, first of all, you're right. I think it's a big day. The way it happened was a little, you kind of wish you could pop the champagne on your own court, you know what I mean, with Indiana beat Miami. And I thought the other night it was going to be when the Sixers, won that game against Minnesota, but they needed a Detroit loss and whatnot. But that notwithstanding, it's a tremendous accomplishment. It really is. And, I'm going to sit down with Coach in a couple of hours, and he's going to – I don't know what he's going to say, but, you keep hearing him say he wants more. But to your point, let's just stop for a second and go back over the last 5 years. And even the last year with Doug Collins, the Sixers had a tough season. So it's the first time in 6 years that the Sixers are going to the playoffs, and it's quite an achievement. You know what I mean? And, yeah, they're not going to pop champagne. I'm kind of joking, but, it's a big milestone, certainly. There's franchises like San Antonio racks up. They're looking for their 19th consecutive season of 50 wins. Portland had a run of being in the playoffs like 19 years. Those are outliers. That doesn't happen. That's what you're looking for here, and that is sustained success. So, you go back 2 years ago, the Sixers won 10 games and, had 26 game losing streaks and really difficult losses and high, the deficits and the defeat totals were just huge. So this is a big thing to watch these young guys put it together so fast and be in the position they're in. Speaking of young Sixers with Simmons and Dario and Joel, it's amazing. I think it's been great. They're 10-3 in this month, and last year we had a month where we got 10 wins in January, and that right there got the marketplace and the ticket sales. It got everything going, and here we are again, and having won 6 in a row with a great opportunity again tonight and a tremendous matchup with Denver. It's all good. It's very exciting. The mantra, the marketing slogan is, this is the moment, and it is. It's pretty cool to watch Simmons and Embiid and the building rock like it did. The other night, it was like a party when Embiid had that big jam and he was dancing out at center court during the game. It is. To me, it's really special.
Tom, he's 7'2". He hit a 3 before that. I said the guy hit a 3, then did a windmill dunk. He's 7'2". It's amazing, and he's only played about 95 games. To me, that series right there, the 3, the steal, the windmill, it was like that puts it in perspective of how special this kid is. But I want to ask you, if Coach was asked this the other night about, was there a time during these games, you're doing these games, it's not easy to be the play-by-play guy when you go into that game essentially knowing you're not winning that game. Was there a time during this 5-year period where you're like, what's going on here? What are we doing? Did you ever feel that the light was at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I thought you were going to say, did you ever think it wasn't worth it, or did you ever think it wouldn't happen? So either way, that's kind of the question, and the answer is no. There were certainly games where you knew it wasn't happening, but there are also a lot of games, Mike, where the Sixers were in the game, and they lost it over a chunk of, say, 4 or 5 minutes. Now, it might have been the first 4 or 5 minutes, but it might have been like the middle portion of the third quarter. They just couldn't play a full 48-minute game. They couldn't withstand, and their second unit wasn't as good as the opposing team's reserves. And then certainly with the injuries, and again, it hasn't been perfect when you look back at Nerlens Noel and Michael Carter-Williams and Jahlil Okafor, and having trotted through so many different players over the course of time. But boy, the mainstay, the constant is Brett Brown, and I'm a huge fan of what he's been able to build, and he's been building a lot of this stuff even though it wasn't showing on the court. And he would talk about it, and it kind of went on deaf ears a little bit because you're not seeing behind the scenes like we were. And I'm speaking about the stuff like sports science and building a culture. Building a culture takes time. It's little things. It's, and you guys are aware, like, after the game, they go in the locker room and somebody rings the bell. It's like the team's MVP. Okay, that sounds cute and, a little league-ish. It's not. It's what the camaraderie, the chemistry, and the fun, and those are minuscule layers and layers upon layers. Whether it's going to Freedom Tower together in New York in the preseason, or going to the Pentagon 2 years ago, doing these things where, and you have to pick and choose. You're not doing a lot of that now. Now it's important not to practice and not to take them off campus and like that. But there's certainly so many different ways that Brett Brown has really built this thing, and obviously having talent is the biggest thing, and developing talent. But it's a long time coming, that's for sure. And the only thing I would say, you call a lot of tough games. Sometimes the mistakes just pile up, and the same mistakes were being made over and over, like in terms of guys turning the balls over or turning the ball over and taking a bad shot. That got old, and I think I liken myself to a season ticket holder that sees all the games. Obviously, I go on the road too, but you know what I mean? I could see the frustration when people were leaving, walking out of the vomitories and rolling their eyes and, saying goodbye to the ushers like, oh, are you kidding me? And it's the same people that are high-fiving the ushers right now. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of the process in a nutshell in terms of where we were and where we're going and where we are right now.
Tom McGinnis, the voice of the 76ers. You'll hear him tonight, coming up in about 4 hours from now. Sixers take on the Nuggets. I was having dinner with Rod Thorne. I guess it was 2012. You guys had just won the playoff series against Chicago, and then lost to Boston in Game 7. So it was a game away from making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Then they make the trade for Bynum, and Thorne said, "Look, we knew that team hit the ceiling. That was as far as that team. It was a fun ride. That was all they were ever going to give us. They took a swing in the opposite direction. They went for." To try to take a swing for a star, and that didn't work, and I commend them for trying. But then after that, they took a swing in the other direction. Did you feel that Thorne was right, that team had hit the ceiling, and that was the right time to say, let's take a chance at something different?
First of all, you're just throwing that out there. You and Rod Thorne get together with other people there. You're chomping on steaks together in AC. Where exactly did this occur?
We're West Virginia alum here, Tom. We stick together. Okay. This was in Caesars when the Sixers, which I wish will happen again, played the exhibition game at Boardwalk Hall. Okay. We had dinner at Caesars.
October.
Yep.
Okay, that was October. Yep.
And Bynum had he was there that night. You guys had played there, and we had dinner up in one of the restaurants at Caesars. But we're West Virginia guys. In fact, I learned this about Rod Thorne in that dinner. He's a big St. Louis Cardinals fan.
Oh, yeah. Well, Rod's a great guy. That was the last Mets game in New Jersey when it had just concluded 2 years in Newark at the Prudential Center. And they go, this is when we were there. It was the final ever game. I'm like, really? Because we're playing a preseason game in Atlantic City in October. But so first of all, this is just my opinion, because this is also Sixers ownership and management's opinion too, like in terms of what Rod Thorne was thinking. I thought that team had a little bit more. Now, Iguodala was probably itching to get on with it. You know what I mean? Like, he probably saw his future somewhere else, which turned out to be true as we played at Denver. That's where he ended up going. But no, look what Lou Williams turned into. You know what I mean? That team was Spencer's not even in the league right now. So there's certainly, you could argue both sides of that. But they played a very competitive playoff series with Miami. Now, we lost in 5 games. In fact, I think it was on Easter. Lou Williams hit a big shot to win the only game. But all of those games, I'm not saying we threatened to win the series, but they were, if you ask LeBron and Wade, and Bosh was the key figure in those playoff series, he made, huge jumper, one after another. But those were very competitive games. So that, to me, that was not a team that was on the cusp of, this is there, we built this as far as it can go. But I get it. They probably were not a championship team. So I can understand that. And then, to go with Bynum, the problem obviously was that Bynum, his knees weren't sound. That was a huge trade, no question about it. And that also was the end of Doug Collins being the Sixers coach too. And he was not ready for a rebuild. And again, to me, they picked the perfect guy who developed players, who's maybe the best at relationships in the entire NBA. And if you went around and polled people and coaches and players and guys that have been around Brett Brown, people like Steve Kerr and any other 4 dozen people, they'd say Brett Brown. So, and then the Sixers went, and obviously Hinkie came aboard. And again, the people to me that don't get enough credit are the owners. They had to, they had to be willing to do. They're paying these players. They played buying them a whole year for not playing. Nerlens, you go on and on. These rookie players that have been paid and didn't play because they're looking with a long-term lens. They deserve, and they withstood the losing and everything that came with that, and to be able to turn the corner and do what they're doing right now, and hopefully for many years to come. So that's sort of how it goes. I can see how somebody may say that group didn't have any more in it. I definitely think Elton Brand was toward the end of his career, but was still contributing. That was a lot of fun making the playoffs at that time. And then, Boston, the Sixers, I remember it was Saturday, Memorial Day weekend, 8 o'clock ABC. We were the only game in the world, and it was on network television, and pretty cool. Sixers, Boston, and we were within 4 minutes. Rajon Rondo made 4 straight plays that put us away. And again, we would have gone down to play Miami. I guess that was the next year when the Sixers played the Bulls and got lucky against Chicago with their injuries and whatnot. But, that's how it goes. And those are turns, big turns. We'll talk about this years from now, what the Sixers did. And again, we'll find out what happens with this process. Is this going to be for multiple years? And you would think so, and put yourself in a position to win a championship and finally punch through and win a title. That's what it's all about.
Tom McGinnis with us, radio voice of the Sixers. They've got the Nuggets tonight at the Wells Fargo Center. Sixers 42-30. They've clinched a playoff berth. They're looking down Cleveland for maybe a number 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. But, Tom, you mentioned Brett Brown and the chemistry that he brings and the relationships that he builds. If you look at the Sixers starting 5, I saw this number come out today, the best 5-man lineups in the NBA by point differential. They're plus 240. OKC is next at 162. That's an astronomical number. What does that say to you about Brett Brown's message getting through?
No, it's awesome. And again, those guys, Joel just turned 24. If you talk about the piece in the Inquirer, that number we've known about the starters in terms of internally, analytically, they know they're number one, their group, their starters are the best, and have been throughout the year. It's awesome. I mean, you look at our opening quarters, we're wrapping up 32 points, per quarter. That's mostly the starters. You look at JJ having a career year at 17, Ben, averaging near triple-double over the last few games. Embiid, the double-double machine, 23 and 11. Dario's having a career year and shooting a 3 at 40%. And now you've found some rotation. This is the other thing. You've added some really veteran pieces in Ersan and Marco Bellinelli, where, again, 8 minutes in the opening quarter. Here comes Bellinelli tonight, I guarantee you. And so, and JJ and Marco have almost become interchangeable. In fact, the other night, Bellinelli had the hot hand, and he stayed in. And even Ersan and Dario swap out like that, too. So our second unit has been good. I mean, the last few minutes of that Minnesota game, that was a tough one because I'll tell you this, the second unit against the Wolves, they were part of the reason the Sixers built up a 28-point lead. It's just they had that huge lead for 12 minutes. A lot of times mop-up duty is 3 or 4 minutes or 2 minutes. It was a whole quarter, and they had some quality players out there in Minnesota. So that was a bit of an anomaly also. But no, our first group, and then again, consider the age. It's an astounding number, but you got to have a good second unit as well, because certainly in the playoffs, they're going to gear and defend and scheme and whatnot for everybody that plays.
In your mind, Tom, where do you think Brett Brown has grown the most since you've seen him with the Sixers basketball team, coaching the Sixers?
Well, that's a good question because, some people might argue strategy or substitution patterns. I understand there's a lot about that. I don't know. I mean, he's been a coach for many years, you know what I mean? Like, the one thing I would say that we don't see anymore, the Sixers used to press. The Sixers would call timeout. Now, the timeouts changed with the rules this year. They would call a timeout 10 seconds into a quarter, because it was more about teaching than it was necessarily about making sure they won the game. Like, you're not calling timeout tonight with 10 seconds gone by in the second half, you know what I mean? So, but again, that's changed just because they've taken away the timeouts. So some of those things I thought he experimented a little bit. He was throwing some stuff against the wall, so to speak. but I'm sure he's gotten better. He's constantly probing, and like when I would say, "Oh, it's been a good summer," this is even a few years ago, like at a season ticket thing at the center in the summer, and he would go into this huge diatribe about how he was learning how people learn, and he was studying from Navy SEALs and the Army, and he went to West Point and he studied with this guy. You know what I mean? And he's the son of teachers and educators. His dad was a coach, so he's constantly learning how young people learn, and never, resting. He's always willing to turn another stone over to find out if there's a better way. So I'm sure he's gotten better in nuance and things in terms of coaching the game, the NBA game. Of all the times he's been a coach, he wasn't an NBA coach other than for the last 5 years. So maybe somebody, a better, bigger, brighter basketball mind would have to answer that. But I know he's grown, and like I said, it's so much about listen, he would have lost that locker room. He would have lost his job if he wasn't tremendous at keeping a group together and having that spirit. He's like a Pied Piper, and just in moving the program forward too, not just on the court during the season, but coaching his coaches and building the whole off the court and the basketball operation that they've put forth and have today.
Tom McGinnis, the voice of the 76ers. You'll hear him tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers and the Nuggets. Now it's about seeding.
Tapped out, Mike. Jeez. This is all I got.
Sixers take on the Nuggets tonight, and now it's about seeding, Tom. I mean, they're the 4 seed, but is there at the beginning of the year, making the playoff, that was like, hey, let's make the playoff, that's the next step. But realistically, you're around this team. At what point do you think they started to really focus on let's get up as high as we can and make a run at this thing?
Well, I think your goals change, internally, and you get greedy. Like, I can remember in training camp, or even when Markell signed, that he said playoffs, and there was like, oh, somebody said playoffs. Are you saying playoffs? And Brett Brown said, no, I'm saying playoffs too. And it was kind of like a story, and of course you should shoot for the playoffs. That's what it's all about. So I'm sure internally the whole quote-unquote Brett Brown saying, we want more, it's important. Look how well they've played at home and what a factor that has been. That's a really big thing. Now, I still contend, because I've called like 100 playoff games. And when you go on the road, you got to steal one of those first 2 games. So somebody else could come in here and do that. Or, like the bigger thing is if the series goes 7, you have games 5 and 7 in your building. That's a really big thing too. So, yeah, and then they look internally at matchups. Like the guys in the analytics department, they're looking at if this and that, the probabilities or whatever. And there's certainly teams that, you maybe wouldn't. Well, you don't want to face Toronto right now. I'll say that. And that doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I can't really speak to that. I know myself, like Indiana scares me. Indiana scares me because it's not just Victor Oladipo and Turner. It's Bogdanovich and Thaddeus Young and Stevenson and Darren Collison and, Corey Joseph. They're good. They're really, to me, they're one of the big surprises too. So Washington, I don't know. I take my chances against Washington. But if you get a home seat, that's going to be a big thing, no doubt about it. It's a very, very, very good thing. It's going to be an interesting 2 weeks at the end of April.
Sure will. And it kicks off tonight, 7 o'clock, Sixers, Denver, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom McGinnis will have the call. He'll be talking with Brett Brown as always, and you'll be able to hear that and more as the Sixers have made the playoffs for the first time since 2012. And by the way, that was that short season. That was that 66-game season. So really, who knows if that game was 80? If that season was 82, maybe they don't get in, right?
Yeah, I thought we were playing pretty well though as that thing went on. But you're right, and that happened before. Like when one of my first playoff series was '98, and that was a shortened season. Also, that was a lockout season. Larry Brown had been here for a year, and I think we won like 32 games. It was a 50-game season or somewhere in there. I think the season you're talking about was a 66-game season.
Yep.
And this other one didn't start till February, and then it was pushed back. The season pushed back and ended in May. And we played Orlando and knocked off Penny Hardaway and the Magic, and then we came back and we played Indiana. That was the start of that deal where we played the Pacers 3 years in a row, and they knocked us off the first 2 years, and eventually in 2001 we were able to beat them. But Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, a shortened lockout season is a lot different than this has been. And this is different, too. This is the way they've done the schedule recently with the breaks. And, like, for example, Denver's on a 7-game road trip. And, we were done with the West Coast by January 1st. So it's all good. It's exciting. It's going to be great. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate the station being part of our network. It's all good, Mike. Thank you for the time.
Well, appreciate it as always, Tom. Enjoy it, and we'll talk soon.
All right, bud. Have a great